Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Michael, and at 6:47 a.m. on October 15, 2019, my radio crackled with the call that would shatter my understanding of reality itself. I was sitting in my Ford Ranger outside the Yellowstone North entrance, sipping coffee from the thermos Sarah had filled for me, still tasting her goodbye kiss on my lips when dispatch's voice cut through the morning static. Ranger Sullivan, we have a code yellow, 16-year-old female Emma Martinez, failed to return from solo day hike yesterday on the Specimen Ridge Trail. Family's at the station now. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I keyed the radio. Copy that, dispatch. ETA to station 15 minutes. I cranked the engine, the dashboard clock reading exactly 6:47 a.m., and felt that familiar knot form in my stomach, the one that always appeared when a kid went missing. 23 years wearing this uniform, and I'd never gotten used to that feeling. In my shirt pocket, Sophie's latest crayon drawing of our family crinkled as I reached for my gear bag, her stick figure version of me wearing my ranger hat and the words, "Best Daddy," scrawled in purple letters across the bottom. The drive to the station took exactly 13 minutes through the crisp Wyoming morning, aspen leaves golden against the deep blue sky that promised a beautiful day for searching. I could smell autumn in the air, that mixture of dying leaves, cold mountain streams, and the first hint of snow that would come soon. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Sophie wants to make pancakes when you get home. Stay safe. Love you. I voice texted back while stopped at a light. Tell her I'll be home for breakfast. Love you both. At the station, I found the Martinez family clustered around Ranger Thompson's desk, like moths drawn to a flame of hope. Mrs. Martinez looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate, clutching a photo of a smiling teenager with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She's never done anything like this, she was saying, her voice breaking. Emma always checks in. Always. She was supposed to call by 6 p.m. yesterday. Mr. Martinez stood behind his wife, one hand on her shoulder, his face grim. She's got her phone, GPS watch, emergency whistle, everything you're supposed to have. But we haven't heard anything since she texted us at 2:30 yesterday afternoon saying she was starting the trail. He looked up at me with the kind of desperation that every parent fears they'll someday feel. Please, Ranger Sullivan, you have to find our daughter. I sat down across from them, pulling out my incident report pad, the worn leather cover smooth from years of use. Tell me everything about yesterday. What time did Emma leave? What was she wearing? Did she mention meeting anyone or going anywhere specific? The familiar routine of information gathering helped calm my own nerves, each detail another piece of the puzzle that would lead me to bring their daughter home. She left the hotel at 8 a.m., Mrs. Martinez said, consulting her phone. She was wearing her blue North Face jacket, black hiking pants, red hiking boots, the expensive ones we got her for her birthday. She had her blue JanSport backpack with water, energy bars, first aid kit. She's been hiking since she was little. She knows what she's doing. The details painted a picture of a prepared, experienced hiker, which made the disappearance more concerning, not less. In my experience, it was usually the overconfident ones who got into the worst trouble. I glanced at the station clock. 7:15 a.m. What time did she say she'd be back? 6 p.m. at the latest, Mr. Martinez replied. She was planning to do the full loop, about 8 miles. Said it would take her most of the day with photo stops. She wants to be a nature photographer. His voice caught on the present tense, hope and fear warring in every word. I stood up, clipping my radio to my belt and checking my gear. GPS unit, extra batteries, emergency beacon, first aid kit, water purification tablets, emergency blanket, flares. The familiar weight of survival equipment that had saved my ass more times than I could count. I'm going to find her, I promised, looking both parents in the eye. I've been working these mountains for over 2 decades. I know every trail, every hiding spot. Every place someone might take shelter. I'll bring Emma home. The drive to the Specimen Ridge trailhead took 45 minutes through increasingly remote terrain, my radio crackling with updates from other rangers beginning their own search patterns. The October morning was crisp, maybe 45 degrees, with thin cloud cover that would burn off by noon. Perfect hiking weather, which made Emma's disappearance even more puzzling. I parked at the trailhead and stepped out, immediately noticing something that made my ranger instincts prickle. Absolute silence. Not normal forest quiet, total, unnatural silence. No bird calls, no insect buzz, no wind through the trees. Even my footsteps on the gravel seemed muffled, wrong somehow. The silence pressed against my eardrums like physical weight, making me want to clear my ears constantly. I grabbed my pack from the truck bed, the sound of the zipper unnaturally loud in the dead air. The trailhead register showed Emma's signature from yesterday at 8:47 a.m. Neat, careful handwriting that matched a responsible teenager who followed safety protocols. Below her entry, the page was blank until my own signature at 8:23 a.m. today. I photographed the page with my phone and headed up the trail, my boots crunching on fallen leaves that should have rustled with life, but instead sounded like walking on broken glass. The Specimen Ridge Trail starts with a gradual incline through dense lodgepole pine forest, the kind of terrain where you can see 30 yards in any direction if you know how to read the spaces between trees. I'd walked this trail hundreds of times, knew every switchback, every creek crossing, every spot where inexperienced hikers typically got confused. But today, something felt fundamentally wrong about the familiar landscape. At the first mile marker, I found Emma's first piece of sign, a partial boot print in a muddy section where Cottonwood Creek crossed the trail. Size 7, distinctive tread pattern that matched the description of her red hiking boots. The print pointed uphill, confirming she'd made it this far. I photographed it, marked the GPS coordinates, and called it in to dispatch. Found sign at mile marker 1, continuing uphill. But as I studied the print more carefully, something nagged at me. The mud around it looked fresh, too fresh for a print that should be nearly 24 hours old. The edges were sharp, defined, as if she'd just passed through minutes ago. I knelt down, touching the mud with my gloved finger. Still wet, still soft. That wasn't possible. The trail continued climbing through a series of switchbacks that gained elevation steadily toward the ridge proper. At each turn, I found more sign, a scuff mark on a rock, a broken branch at shoulder height, another partial boot print. But each piece of evidence looked impossibly fresh, as if Emma was just ahead of me, just around the next bend. The wrongness of it made my skin crawl, but I pushed forward, driven by the promise I'd made to her parents. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Michael's situation? Comment below. At mile marker 3, the trail opened into a small meadow where wildflowers should have been dormant for the season. Instead, I found them in full summer bloom. Impossible lupines and paintbrush flowers that should have been dead for weeks. The sight stopped me cold, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Even more disturbing, Emma's boot prints led directly across the meadow, but as I followed them, they seemed to loop back on themselves in patterns that defied physics. I pulled out my phone to call for backup, but the screen showed 2:47 p.m. That wasn't right. I'd left the trailhead just after 8:30 a.m., and even with careful tracking, I hadn't been hiking for more than 2 hours. But my watch showed the same time, 2:47 p.m. The sun's position in the sky confirmed it. Somehow hours had passed without me noticing. "Base, this is Sullivan," I radioed, trying to keep the confusion out of my voice. "I'm at mile marker 3, but I'm showing 2:47 p.m. on my time. Can you confirm?" Static answered me, then more static. I checked my radio. Full battery, clear signal strength. "Base, do you copy?" Nothing but the electronic hiss of empty frequencies. The silence around me deepened, if that was possible. Even my own breathing seemed muffled, as if the air itself was absorbing sound. I continued following Emma's trail across the meadow, her boot prints clear in the soft earth. But as I walked, I began to notice something that made my blood run cold. My own footprints were appearing in the trail ahead of me, not behind me. where they should be. Ahead of me. Size 11. Danner hiking boots with the distinctive wear pattern on the left heel where I'd scraped it on a rock last summer, but I hadn't walked this section of trail yet. I was walking it now for the first time today, following my own footprints that somehow already existed. I stopped walking and stared at the impossible tracks. My hands began to shake, not from cold, but from a primal fear that something fundamental about reality was breaking down around me. In my pocket, Sophie's drawing crinkled as I unconsciously clutched it, her innocent crayon family becoming my anchor to a world that made sense. "What the hell is happening here?" I whispered to the dead air and my voice echoed back wrong, arriving from directions where I hadn't spoken. The trail led into a grove of ancient pines, their trunks easily 4 feet in diameter, the kind of old-growth trees that had been standing when the first explorers mapped this region. As I entered the grove, the temperature dropped noticeably, not gradually, but all at once, like walking into a meat freezer. My breath began to mist and frost started forming on the evergreen needles despite the afternoon sun. Emma's tracks continued through the grove, but now they were accompanied by something else. Other footprints that looked exactly like hers, dozens of them all heading in different directions. Some went deeper into the trees, some doubled back toward the meadow, some led to trees and simply stopped, as if she'd walked into the bark and disappeared. I followed the freshest-looking set, my heart hammering against my ribs. The prints led to a clearing in the center of the grove where a massive granite boulder sat like an altar. And there, sitting on the rock with her back to me, was a figure in a blue North Face jacket. "Emma?" I called out, relief flooding through me. "Emma Martinez." The figure didn't respond. I approached carefully, noting that she was sitting perfectly still, not moving at all. "Emma, I'm Ranger Sullivan. Your parents sent me to find you." As I got closer, I could see that she was staring straight ahead at something I couldn't see. Her dark hair was pulled back in the same ponytail as in the photograph, and she was wearing exactly what her parents had described. But something was wrong with the way she sat, too still, too rigid, like a mannequin positioned for display. "Emma?" I reached out to touch her shoulder, and my hand passed right through her. The figure flickered like a television with bad reception, then vanished completely. I stood alone in the clearing, my heart rate spiking as adrenaline flooded my system. Where Emma had been sitting, the rock was covered with a thin layer of frost that spelled out words in letters I could barely read. 2:47 p.m. forever. I stumbled backward, my rational mind struggling to process what I'd just witnessed. Hallucination brought on by altitude and stress, I told myself. Dehydration, low blood sugar. But my GPS unit was spinning wildly, unable to lock onto satellites, and my watch face was flickering between times. 2:47 p.m., 2:47 p.m., 2:47 p.m. over and over again. From somewhere in the trees around me I heard Emma's voice. "Help me, I'm stuck. I can't get out." I spun toward the sound but saw nothing. "Where are you? Keep talking." "I've been walking the same section for hours." Her voice came from a different direction now. "Every time I reach the meadow, I'm back at the boulder. Every time I try to leave, I end up here. What time is it?" "It's..." I looked at my watch. Still 2:47 p.m. "It's 2:47 in the afternoon. Where are you? I can hear you, but I can't see you." 2:47, she repeated, and I could hear tears in her voice. "It's always 2:47. I've been walking since 2:47 yesterday. The sun never moves. The shadows never change. I'm so tired, but I can't sleep because time won't pass." The horror of what she was describing hit me like a physical blow. Trapped in a single moment, conscious and aware but unable to move forward in time. It was the kind of cosmic nightmare that human minds weren't equipped to handle. "Emma, listen to me. I'm going to get you out of this. But I need you to tell me exactly what happened when you first got here." "I was taking pictures of the boulder," her disembodied voice replied. "There was a man here, an old man in clothes that looked wrong. Old-fashioned. He said he was lost, asked me what time it was. When I told him it was 2:47, he smiled and said, 'Perfect. Then everything stopped. Around me, the ancient pines began to creak and groan despite the absence of wind. The sound was wrong, too rhythmic, like a massive clock mechanism grinding through broken gears. The temperature continued to drop, and my breath came in thick white puffs that hung in the air far longer than they should have. "The old man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What did he look like?" "Tall, really thin. He was wearing a suit that looked like it was from the 1800s, but his eyes..." Emma's voice cracked. "His eyes were like looking into empty space. Not black, not any color, just nothing. And when he smiled, I could see that he had too many teeth." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. In 23 years of ranger work, I'd dealt with lost hikers, medical emergencies, wildlife encounters, and every variety of human stupidity. But nothing in my experience had prepared me for this. "Emma, I need you to stay calm. Can you see me right now?" "No," she whispered. "I can hear you, but I can't see anything except the boulder and the trees. It's like I'm in a snow globe, but the same scene over and over. Sometimes I see other people walking the trail, but when I call to them, they can't hear me." Other people. I thought about the multiple sets of Emma's footprints I'd found, all leading in different directions. "How many times have you walked this loop?" "I don't know. Hundreds? Thousands?" I tried counting at first, but the numbers don't stick. Everything resets except my memory. I remember every single time I've walked from here to the meadow and back. Every step, every breath, but my watch always says 2:47. The grinding sound from the trees grew louder, and I began to notice that the shadows on the ground were moving in small, jerky increments, not smoothly like normal shadows following the sun, but like the hands of a clock ticking from one position to another. The wrongness of it made my stomach churn. "Emma, I think something is feeding on you being trapped here. Some kind of entity that feeds on temporal loops. We need to break the cycle." I had no idea if that was true, but it felt right in a horrible cosmic way. "When you try to leave, what happens exactly?" "I start walking toward the meadow," she said, her voice getting fainter. "Everything looks normal until I get to the edge of the trees. Then I blink and I'm back at the boulder every single time." I pulled out my phone to try calling for backup again, but the screen was now showing dozens of time displays, all flickering rapidly between different moments. 2:47:23 p.m., 2:47:18 p.m., 2:47:31 p.m., cycling through the same minute over and over. The battery indicator jumped from full to empty and back again in rhythm with the flickering. From the direction of the meadow came a sound that made my blood freeze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the forest floor, but with the wrong rhythm, too precise, too mechanical. And with each step, the temperature dropped another degree. "He's coming back," Emma whispered, her voice now barely audible. "The old man. He comes to check on me sometimes. He always asks what time it is, and I always have to tell him 2:47. He smiles every time like it's the funniest joke in the world." The footsteps stopped at the edge of the clearing. I turned toward the sound but saw nothing except empty forest. But the silence that followed was different from the unnatural quiet I'd been experiencing. This was the silence of something massive holding its breath. "Good afternoon," came a voice like rustling leaves and grinding stone. "Might I inquire as to the current time?" I spun around, and there he was, impossibly tall and thin, wearing a black suit that looked like it belonged in a daguerreotype. His skin was pale as bone, and when he smiled I saw what Emma meant about too many teeth. Rows and rows of them, like a shark's mouth grafted onto a human face. But his eyes were the worst part, not empty, but filled with something vast and incomprehensible, like looking into the space between stars. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "What time is it?" Every instinct screamed at me not to answer, but my mouth opened against my will. 2:47 p.m. His smile widened impossibly. "Perfect. Simply perfect. Time is such a precious thing, don't you think? Most humans waste it so carelessly, letting it slip through their fingers like water. But here, in my little pocket of eternity, time becomes truly valuable. One perfect moment, preserved forever. I forced my hand to move toward my radio, but my movements felt sluggish, like moving through thick syrup. Let her go. Take me instead. He laughed, and the sound was like clock gears stripping their teeth. Oh, but I'm not taking anyone. I'm giving the gift of infinite time. Your young friend has experienced more moments than most humans live in their entire lifespans. She has become intimate with the very fabric of temporal existence. That's not living, I managed to say. That's torture. Is it? He tilted his head at an angle that was just wrong enough to make my vision blur. Consider. She will never age, never die, never lose the people she loves to the ravages of time. She has achieved a kind of immortality that kings and emperors have dreamed of for millennia. Around us, the forest began to change. The trees grew taller and older, their bark becoming rough and ancient. The clearing expanded and contracted like a breathing lung. The granite boulder shifted and flowed like liquid stone. Reality was becoming unstable, warping around this entity's presence. What are you? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. I am what remains when time forgets to move forward, he replied. I am the pause between seconds, the gap between heartbeats, the moment of hesitation before thought becomes action. Humans call me many names, but names are for things that exist in linear time. I simply am. My watch face cracked, and through the fracture, I could see thousands of tiny clocks, all showing 2:47 p.m., all ticking in perfect unison. The sound was hypnotic, seductive, promising an end to worry and pain and the terrible forward rush of mortality. Join us, the entity whispered, and its voice was inside my head now. Bring your daughter here. Bring your wife. Give them the gift of forever. No more goodbyes, no more loss, no more watching your little girl grow up and move away and forget her father. Just one perfect moment, preserved in amber, treasured for eternity. For a terrifying instant, I felt myself tempted. Sophie would never have to face the dangers of growing up. Sarah would never have to worry about me not coming home. We could be frozen in a moment of pure love, our family complete and safe forever. But then I heard Emma's voice, small and broken. Please don't leave me here alone. The spell shattered. This thing wasn't offering preservation. It was offering a kind of death worse than death. An eternity of consciousness without growth, without change, without hope. I thought of Sophie's drawing in my pocket, her stick figures holding hands under a crayon sun, and I felt something ignite in my chest. No, I said, and the word came out stronger than I felt. Time isn't meant to stop. Growth isn't something to be afraid of. My daughter is going to grow up and make her own choices and live her own life, and that's exactly what's supposed to happen. The entity's smile faded, and for the first time it looked genuinely surprised. You would choose decay over preservation? Pain over perfection? I choose life, I said, pulling Sophie's drawing from my pocket. The crayon colors seemed to glow in the unnatural twilight. Real life, with all the messiness and uncertainty and beautiful imperfection that comes with it. The entity hissed, and the sound was like steam escaping from a broken pipe. Then you choose to watch everything you love crumble to dust. I choose to love it while it's here, I replied and took a step forward. Now let Emma go. The clearing began to spin around us, trees blurring into streaks of brown and green. The granite boulder cracked down the middle, and from the fissure came a sound like a massive clock breaking. The entity's form began to waver and stretch, becoming less human and more like a tear in the fabric of reality itself. Time is an ocean, it shrieked, its voice distorting. You are all just droplets evaporating in the sun. I offer permanence and you choose dissolution. I choose change, I said, and crushed Sophie's drawing against my chest. The crayon wax melted under my touch, staining my uniform with bright colors. I choose tomorrow and the day after that and all the tomorrows that come after. The entity let out a sound like the universe screaming, and suddenly Emma was there. Not a flicker or a vision, but solid and real, stumbling toward me with tears streaming down her face. "Ranger Sullivan? Is it really you?" I caught her as she collapsed, her body shaking with exhaustion and relief. She felt real, warm, human, gloriously, imperfectly human. "I've got you," I said. "I've got you. What time is it?" She looked at her GPS watch, and her face broke into a smile of pure joy. 3:12 p.m. It's 3:12 p.m. and the seconds are moving. Behind us, the entity was collapsing in on itself, becoming a shrinking point of impossible darkness. "This is not over," it hissed as it disappeared. "Time always wins in the end. Everything you love will age and die and be forgotten." "Maybe," I said to the empty air where it had been, "but they'll live first, and that's what matters." The forest around us shuddered and snapped back to normal like a rubber band returning to shape. Bird songs filled the air, insects buzzed, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. The granite boulder was just a boulder again, and the ancient pines were just very old trees. Emma and I made it back to the trailhead as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that meant the day was ending and tomorrow would begin. Her parents were waiting with the search and rescue team, and the reunion was everything a happy ending should be: tears and hugs and promises and gratitude. But as I drove home to my own family, I couldn't shake the entity's final words. Everything I loved would age and die and be forgotten. Sarah would grow old, Sophie would grow up and move away, and someday I would be nothing but a name on a headstone. But when I walked through my front door and Sophie ran to me yelling, "Daddy," and Sarah kissed me and asked how my day was, I realized something the entity couldn't understand. The temporary nature of love didn't make it less valuable. It made it infinitely precious. We had pancakes for dinner that night, Sophie chattering about her school day while Sarah held my hand under the table. Outside, time moved forward the way it was supposed to, carrying us all toward an uncertain future that might hold heartbreak and loss and 1,000 different kinds of pain. And I wouldn't trade a single ticking second of it for all the frozen eternities in the universe. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Emma. I read every single one. My name is Michael, and at 6:47 a.m. on October 15th, 2018, my radio crackled with the call that would change my life forever. I was sitting in my Ford F-150 Ranger truck, steam rising from my thermos of black coffee, watching the first pale fingers of dawn creep through the towering Douglas firs of Olympic National Forest. The digital clock on my dashboard read 6:47 when dispatch broke through the morning silence with that tone every ranger dreads. Unit 47, we have a code yellow. Missing hiker, female, age 23. Last known position, Ho River Trail, mile marker 3.2. Family reports she's been missing since yesterday afternoon. My stomach dropped. In my 8 years as a forest ranger, I'd worked dozens of missing person cases. Some ended with relieved families and embarrassed hikers who'd simply taken a wrong turn. Others ended with body bags and trauma counselors. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 47 responding. I keyed the radio with hands that had learned to stay steady through years of emergency calls. Can you give me details on the missing person? Jessica Marie Thompson, 23, University of Washington student. She was solo hiking the Ho River Trail. Her roommate expected her back by 8 p.m. last night. Vehicle located at Trailhead parking lot. Her family drove up from Seattle this morning. I could hear the exhaustion in Sarah's voice from dispatch. We'd both been at this job long enough to know that after 12 hours in the Olympic wilderness, especially with the temperature dropping to near freezing overnight, the chances of finding someone alive dropped significantly. But I pushed that thought away. At home, my 8-year-old daughter Emma was probably just waking up, and my wife Sarah would be making pancakes like she did every Saturday morning. Emma had slipped a crayon drawing of a rainbow into my jacket pocket yesterday, her little ritual for keeping Daddy safe in the forest. That drawing was pressed against my chest right now, and it reminded me that every missing person was someone's daughter, someone's rainbow. ETA 15 minutes, I radioed back. already pulling onto Forest Service Road 101. The drive to the Hoh River trailhead took me deeper into the heart of the Olympic Peninsula, where cell towers disappeared and the forest grew so thick that even at midday, shadows pooled like black water between the trees. My truck's headlights cut through wisps of fog that clung to the gravel road like ghostly fingers. Something felt wrong from the moment I arrived at the trailhead. The parking lot held only two vehicles, Jessica's silver Honda Civic and a black SUV with Washington plates that I assumed belonged to her family. But it was the silence that made my ranger instincts prickle. October in the Olympics should have been alive with the sounds of elk bugling, ravens calling, and the constant drip of moisture from moss-heavy branches. Instead, the forest was utterly, unnaturally quiet. As I stepped out of my truck, the temperature hit me like a physical blow. My breath came out in white puffs, and I could feel the dampness seeping through my wool ranger uniform. I checked my gear: GPS unit, emergency radio, first aid kit, emergency bivvy, 72-hour food rations, water purification tablets, signaling mirror, whistle, multi-tool, and my service weapon. Everything a ranger needed for a standard search and rescue operation. Except there was nothing standard about the silence pressing down on this place. A man in his 50s approached from the SUV, his face haggard with sleepless worry. "Are you the ranger? I'm Jessica's father, Robert Thompson. Please, she's been out there all night. The temperature..." His voice cracked. Behind him, a woman who had to be Jessica's mother sat in the passenger seat, clutching a cell phone with white knuckles. Every few seconds, she'd dial a number, listen, then hang up with the hopeless gesture of someone who knew no one would answer. "I'm Ranger Michael Stevens," I said, extending a hand that Robert gripped with desperate strength. "I need you to tell me everything about Jessica's plans yesterday. Every detail could matter." Robert pulled out his phone, showing me their last text exchange. The timestamp read 2:17 p.m. the previous afternoon. "Dad, the forest is so beautiful today. About to head back. Should be home for dinner. Love you." That text had been sent from mile marker 3 to on the Hoh River Trail, exactly where dispatch had said her last known position was. But the Hoh River Trail was a simple out-and-back hike. From mile marker 3.2, it should have taken Jessica less than 2 hours to return to the parking lot. "She's an experienced hiker," Robert continued, his words tumbling over each other. "She knows these trails. She has all the right gear. She wouldn't just disappear." But I'd learned that in the Olympic wilderness, experienced hikers disappeared more often than anyone wanted to admit. The forest had a way of swallowing people, turning familiar trails into mazes, making even GPS units malfunction in the deep valleys where ancient trees blocked satellite signals. I studied Jessica's photo on Robert's phone. She was beautiful in that fresh-faced college way, with shoulder-length brown hair and bright green eyes full of life and confidence, the kind of young woman who probably felt invincible, who wouldn't hesitate to help a stranger or investigate an interesting sound off the main trail. "I'm going to bring her home," I told Robert, meaning every word. The same promise I made to Sarah and Emma every morning when I left for work. I shouldered my pack and headed for the trailhead, my boots crunching on the frost-covered boardwalk that led into the temperate rainforest. The Hoh River Trail was one of the most popular hikes in Olympic National Park, a well-maintained path that wound through groves of massive Sitka spruces and western hemlocks draped in moss that hung like green curtains. But as I walked deeper into the forest, that unnatural silence followed me. My radio crackled with static, then cleared. "Unit 47, this is dispatch. Be advised, we've had 3 other missing person reports in the Olympic Peninsula area over the past 6 months. All young women, all solo hikers. 2 are still missing." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Dispatch, can you send me those case files to my mobile unit?" "Negative, Unit 47. You're moving out of digital range, but Michael..." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Be careful out there. Something's been wrong in those woods lately. The other rangers have been reporting strange things." The radio dissolved into static before I could ask what she meant. At mile marker 1.5, I found the first sign that Jessica had passed this way. A granola bar wrapper caught on a devil's club thorn beside the trail, I bagged it as evidence, noting the time and GPS coordinates in my logbook. Standard search protocol demanded documentation of everything, no matter how small. But as I continued up the trail, the forest around me began to change in ways that violated everything I knew about Olympic National Park. The moss hanging from the trees seemed to move without any wind. Shadows fell at impossible angles, creating pockets of darkness that my eyes couldn't penetrate even with my high-powered LED flashlight. At mile marker 2, I heard the first whisper. It was so faint I thought it was just the sound of my own breathing, but as I stopped to listen, it came again. A woman's voice calling from somewhere off the trail to my left. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone crying for help. Every instinct I had as a ranger screamed at me to investigate. This could be Jessica, injured and lost somewhere in the dense undergrowth. But another instinct, something deeper and more primitive, told me that following that voice would be a mistake. I compromised by calling out, Jessica Thompson, this is Ranger Stevens. If you can hear me, keep making noise. I'm coming to find you." The response chilled my blood. The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by silence so complete it felt like a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. Then, from the same direction, came the sound of laughter. Not the relieved laughter of someone who'd just been rescued, but something else. Something that didn't sound entirely human. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Michael's situation? Comment below. I forced myself to continue up the trail, my hand resting on the grip of my service weapon. At mile marker 3, the path crossed a wooden bridge over a creek that shouldn't have been there. I'd hiked this trail dozens of times over the years, and there had never been a creek at this location. But here it was, dark water flowing silently beneath boards that looked like they'd been weathered by decades of rain. My GPS unit began malfunctioning, the screen flickering between my actual coordinates and impossible readings that placed me miles underground. The digital compass spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. Even my watch seemed to be running slow, the second hand stuttering between tick marks. That's when I found Jessica's backpack. It was sitting upright in the middle of the trail at mile marker 3.2, positioned so carefully it might have been placed there by a museum curator. The bright blue REI pack was completely dry despite the morning dew that covered everything else in the forest. Jessica's water bottles were still full. Her food was untouched. Her emergency whistle and bear spray remained clipped to the pack's exterior loops. But Jessica herself was nowhere to be seen. I called her name again, my voice echoing strangely in the unnatural quiet. As I bent to examine the backpack, I noticed something that made my hands shake. There were no footprints around it. None. The soft earth of the trail should have been marked by Jessica's boots, by her walking up to this spot and setting down her pack. Instead, the ground was smooth, as if the pack had simply materialized there. That's when I saw her for the first time. At the edge of my vision, barely visible through the gaps between massive tree trunks, stood a woman in white. Even at a distance, I could see that her dress was stained with something dark. She was too far away for me to make out her features, but I could feel her watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Ma'am," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need assistance?" The woman in white didn't respond. She simply stood there, motionless as the trees around her. But as I watched, she began to move closer, gliding between the massive trunks with movements that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. She didn't step over fallen logs or push through the undergrowth. She simply moved, flowing like mist, always keeping just at the edge of clear sight. Every rational part of my mind was screaming that this was just another hiker. Maybe someone who'd gotten lost and was too traumatized to respond properly. But something about the way she moved, the absolute wrongness of her presence in this place, triggered every survival instinct I'd developed in 8 years of forest work. I reached for my radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I've located the missing hiker's equipment at mile marker 3.2. Requesting immediate backup and a full search team." Static answered me. Complete, dead static. I tried my cell phone, knowing it was useless this deep in the forest. No signal as expected. But the screen showed something impossible. The time was 2:17 p.m., the exact moment Jessica had sent her last text message. But that was impossible. I'd been hiking for hours. It should have been past noon, not mid-afternoon. When I looked up from my phone, the woman in white was closer. She stood perhaps 50 yards away now, just visible through the grove of ancient hemlocks. Her dress was definitely stained with something dark that looked wet despite the dry weather. Her hair hung in long, dark strands that covered most of her face, but I could see pale skin and the suggestion of features that might once have been beautiful. "Ma'am, I'm a forest ranger," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "If you're injured, I can help you. Do you know anything about a missing hiker named Jessica Thompson?" This time, the woman in white responded. She raised one pale hand and pointed deeper into the forest, toward an area where the trees grew so thick that even my flashlight couldn't penetrate the darkness between them. Then she mouthed a single word that I somehow heard despite the distance between us. "Come." Every procedure manual I'd ever studied, every training course I'd taken, every instinct developed through years of search and rescue work told me not to follow. You never left the established trail during a search operation. You never went alone into unmarked wilderness. You never followed strangers into areas where backup couldn't reach you. But somewhere in that dark forest was Jessica Thompson, a 23-year-old college student whose parents were sitting in a parking lot, desperately waiting for news that their daughter was safe. And the woman in white might be the only person who knew where Jessica was. I made the decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I left the trail. The forest closed around me like a living thing as I pushed through undergrowth that seemed designed to snag and tear at my uniform. Thorns caught at my jacket, and more than once I had to use my multi-tool to cut through vines that blocked my path. The deeper I went, the darker it became, until I was forced to use my flashlight even though my watch still insisted it was mid-afternoon. The woman in white stayed always just ahead of me, visible enough to follow but never close enough to speak to directly. She moved through the forest without making a sound, never disturbing a single branch or leaving a footprint in the soft earth. After what felt like hours of following her deeper into the wilderness, I emerged into a clearing that shouldn't have existed. It was perfectly circular, perhaps 30 feet across, surrounded by trees so tall and ancient they must have been growing here when the first European explorers reached the Pacific coast. But it wasn't the age of the trees that made my blood run cold. It was what lay in the center of the clearing. A small cabin sat in the exact middle of the space, its walls built from logs that had weathered to the color of old bones. The roof was covered in moss so thick it looked like green fur, and the single window was dark as a dead eye. But it was the front door that made my hands shake as I reached for my weapon. The door was painted white, but the paint was stained and splattered with something that looked like dried blood. And hanging from the door's rusty handle was a piece of fabric I recognized immediately, bright blue nylon from an REI backpack. "Jessica!" I shouted, my voice echoing strangely in the circular clearing. "Jessica, are you in there?" The cabin remained silent, but the woman in white finally turned to face me fully. What I saw destroyed every rational explanation my mind had been trying to construct. Her face was beautiful, or had been once, but now it was the beauty of something that had been dead for a very long time. Her skin was the color of milk, with dark veins visible beneath the surface. Her eyes were completely black, not just the irises, but the entire eye, as if someone had filled the sockets with oil. But it was her smile that nearly sent me running back into the forest, her lips pulled back to reveal teeth that were too sharp, too numerous and stained with something dark. "She's waiting for you," the woman in white said, her voice carrying across the clearing despite the fact that her lips never moved. The words seemed to come from the air itself, from the trees, from the very ground beneath my feet. "She's been waiting so long." I drew my service weapon, though some part of me knew that bullets would be useless against whatever this thing was. "Where is Jessica Thompson? What have you done with her?" The woman in white laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of broken glass. "I haven't done anything to her, not yet. But the sun is setting, and when full darkness comes, she'll join us. She'll become one of the lost ones wandering these woods forever." "Us?" I managed to ask. All the girls who came before, all the daughters and sisters and girlfriends who thought they were safe in daylight, who believed their technology and their knowledge would protect them. The woman's black eyes fixed on mine. But the forest is older than their GPS devices, older than their emergency beacons, and some things that die in these woods don't stay dead. That's when I heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from inside the cabin. The sound of fingernails clawing against wood, desperate and rhythmic. Someone was alive in there, trapped and trying to get out. I ran toward the cabin, my boots pounding against earth that felt spongy and wrong beneath my feet. Behind me, the woman in white began to laugh again, but the sound was changing, becoming something that no human throat could produce. The cabin door was locked, but 8 years of emergency response training had taught me how to handle locked doors. I put my shoulder against the weathered wood and pushed with all my strength. The door splintered inward, releasing a smell that hit me like a physical blow, the smell of fear sweat, of unwashed bodies, of something rotting in the darkness. Inside the cabin, I found Jessica. She was alive, but barely. Tied to a chair in the center of the single room, her clothes torn and dirty, her eyes wide with terror that had pushed her beyond the edge of sanity. When she saw me, she tried to scream, but only a hoarse whisper came out. "It's okay," I said, holstering my weapon and pulling out my multi-tool to cut her bonds. "I'm Ranger Stevens. Your parents sent me to find you. You're safe now." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. The scratching sound I'd heard wasn't coming from Jessica trying to escape. It was coming from the walls around us, as if something with very long fingernails was trying to claw its way inside. "She comes at night," Jessica whispered as I freed her hands. "Every night, she brings the others." "Others?" Jessica's eyes rolled toward the back corner of the cabin, and I followed her gaze with my flashlight. What I saw there made me understand why 3 other young women had gone missing in these woods over the past 6 months. They were still here. 3 other women sat in chairs identical to Jessica's, but they'd been here much longer. Their clothes had rotted away to tatters. Their skin had taken on the same milk-white pallor as the woman outside, and their eyes were completely black, and they were all smiling with teeth that were too sharp. "She's collecting us," Jessica whispered, "building her family. And when the sun goes down tonight, I'll become like them." Through the cabin's single window, I could see that the light was indeed fading. My watch now read 6:30 p.m., though I could have sworn it was afternoon just moments ago. Outside, the woman in white was no longer alone. Other figures moved between the trees, all wearing the same stained white dresses, all with the same black eyes and sharp smiles. That's when my training kicked in. 8 years of search and rescue had taught me that in emergency situations, you don't think about the impossible. You focus on what needs to be done. Jessica was alive, and she was my responsibility. Everything else was secondary. I helped Jessica to her feet, surprised by how light she felt, as if whatever had been done to her had somehow made her less substantial. "We're leaving. Right now." "You can't," she whispered. "The forest won't let us leave. I've tried. Every day I've tried." "How long have you been here?" "Forever," she said, and I realized that to someone who'd been trapped in this cabin with 3 corpses for company, forever might be exactly what it felt like. But when I checked my GPS unit, something impossible showed on the screen. According to the device, we weren't in Olympic National Forest at all. We were somewhere that didn't exist on any map, coordinates that placed us in empty ocean hundreds of miles from shore. I thought of Emma's drawing in my pocket, of Sarah making pancakes in our warm kitchen, of the promise I'd made to bring Jessica home. Sometimes love is stronger than fear, stronger than the impossible, stronger than things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. "Hold on to me," I told Jessica. "And whatever happens, don't let go." We stepped out of the cabin together into a world that had become something from a nightmare. The clearing was filled with women in white dresses, dozens of them all watching us with those terrible black eyes. They stood motionless as statues, forming a perfect circle around the cabin, blocking every path back into the forest. The original woman in white, the one I'd followed here, stepped forward. Up close, I could see that the stains on her dress weren't just blood. They were everything that had once made her human. All the messy, beautiful, imperfect things that separated the living from the dead. "You can join us willingly," she said, her voice echoing from every direction at once. "Or you can run, and we'll hunt you through these woods until your heart bursts from fear. But you cannot leave. No one leaves." I drew my weapon again, knowing it was useless but needing the weight of it in my hand. "We're walking out of here. Right now." The woman in white smiled, showing those horrible teeth. Men have tried to save them before. Forest rangers, police officers, fathers and brothers and boyfriends. They all became part of our collection eventually. That's when I noticed the other shapes moving between the trees at the edge of the clearing. Not women in white dresses, but men in rotting uniforms. Park rangers, sheriff's deputies, even what looked like a military uniform from decades past. All with the same black eyes, all with the same sharp smiles. "The forest is hungry," the woman in white continued. "It feeds on love, on hope, on the desperate need to save someone. And you, Michael Stevens, father of Emma, husband of Sarah, you're full of love. You'll taste so sweet when you join us." She knew my family's names. Somehow, this thing knew about Emma and Sarah. That's when I understood what I was really fighting. This wasn't just about Jessica anymore. This was about every person I'd ever loved, every promise I'd ever made, every reason I had to keep breathing. If I failed here, if I became one of those shambling corpses in ranger uniforms, then someday Sarah might come looking for me. Someday, Emma might grow up and become one of the women in white dresses. I thought about Emma's drawing in my pocket, about the rainbow she'd colored so carefully, about her little voice saying, "To keep Daddy safe in the forest," and suddenly I knew what I had to do. "You're right," I told the woman in white. "Love is what brought me here, but you made one mistake." "What mistake?" I pulled Emma's drawing from my pocket, holding it up so all the dead things in the clearing could see it. The paper seemed to glow in the fading light, the bright color somehow more real than anything else in this place. "You think love makes us weak, but love is what makes us human, and being human means we don't give up. Ever." The woman in white's smile faltered. Around the clearing, the other figures began to step backward, as if the drawing was something they couldn't approach. "That's just paper," the woman said, but her voice had lost its supernatural echo. "Children's scribbles." "This is a rainbow," I said, holding the drawing higher. "My daughter drew it to keep me safe. And you know what a rainbow is? It's light breaking through darkness. It's hope after the storm. It's the promise that no matter how bad things get, something beautiful is coming." The forest around us began to change. The unnatural darkness was lifting, replaced by the honest gray of actual dusk in the Olympic Peninsula. The ancient trees were just trees again, massive and beautiful but not malevolent, and the women in white dresses, they were fading, becoming translucent. "This isn't possible," the woman in white whispered, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Everything's possible when you have something to fight for," I said, taking Jessica's hand. "And I have a family waiting for me at home." The woman in white let out a shriek that shattered the unnatural silence of the clearing, a sound of pure rage and hunger and loss. But she was already fading, her form dissolving into mist that dispersed among the trees. One by one, the other figures followed her into whatever darkness had spawned them, until Jessica and I stood alone in a clearing that was just a clearing, surrounded by trees that were just trees. My GPS unit flickered back to life, showing our actual coordinates, 2.3 miles northeast of the Hoh River Trail, well within the mapped boundaries of Olympic National Forest. My radio crackled with static, then cleared. "Unit 47, this is dispatch. Please respond. We've lost contact with you for the past 4 hours. 4 hours. According to my watch, we'd been gone for less than 1. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I have the missing hiker. Jessica Thompson is alive and in need of medical attention, but she's mobile. We're heading back to the trailhead now." The hike back to the parking lot took exactly as long as it should have. following game trails and compass bearings that led us directly to the Hoh River Trail. Jessica didn't speak during the entire journey, but she held my hand with desperate strength as if letting go might send her back to that cabin with its terrible occupants. When we emerged from the forest, Robert and Mrs. Thompson were waiting exactly where I'd left them. The reunion was everything a ranger hopes for: tears of joy, desperate hugs, and the kind of relief that makes all the risk worthwhile. But as the paramedics checked Jessica's vital signs and Robert shook my hand with tears streaming down his face, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Thompson was holding her cell phone, showing me the last text message Jessica had sent. The timestamp still read 2:17 p.m., but the message was different. Instead of "Dad, the forest is so beautiful today. About to head back. Should be home for dinner. Love you." The screen now showed, "Help me. She won't let me leave. The woman in white has us all." I never told anyone about that message. What would be the point? Jessica was safe, reunited with her family, receiving the medical care she needed. The official report stated that she'd suffered exposure and dehydration after becoming lost off trail, leading to confusion and possible hallucinations. But I know what I saw in that clearing. I know about the cabin with its terrible occupants, about the woman in white and her collection of the lost. And sometimes on foggy mornings when I'm driving the Forest Service roads, I catch glimpses of white dresses between the trees. The other missing women were never found. Their cases remain open, filed under presumed dead due to misadventure. But I know they're still out there somewhere in the vast wilderness of the Olympic Peninsula, waiting for the next lost hiker to stumble into their web. Jessica recovered eventually. She transferred to a university in Arizona as far from the forest as she could get. She sends me a Christmas card every year, always with the same message: "Thank you for bringing me home." But she never signs her name, and the return address is always different. Sometimes I wonder if I really saved her that day, or if something else came back with us from that clearing. Something that wears Jessica's face but has black eyes and sharp teeth when no one is looking. I've never told Sarah about any of this. How could I? But I've made sure Emma understands that if she ever gets lost in the woods, she should never follow strangers who promise to help her find her way. And I've taught her that if she ever sees a woman in a white dress in the forest, she should run. Because love brought me into those woods and love brought me out. But some things that hunger for love are older than human kindness, and they're always watching from between the trees, waiting for the next person who cares enough to follow them into the darkness. The woman in white is still out there, and she's still collecting. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Jessica. I read every single one. My name is Christopher, and I saw Ashley for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply disappeared. It was October 14th, 2018, and I'd been a ranger at Olympic National Park for 17 years. 17 years of successful rescues, of bringing lost hikers home to their families, of never losing anyone on my watch. That streak ended at 2:47 p.m. on the Hoh River Trail, when Ashley Brennan vanished into thin air while I was escorting her back to the trailhead. She'd been reported missing the night before by her college roommates. 21 years old, brunette, wearing a red North Face jacket and carrying a blue JanSport backpack. Standard search and rescue. I'd found her sitting by Miller Creek, seemingly unharmed, claiming she'd gotten turned around in the fog. Relief flooded through me as I radioed base. "Ranger Station, this is Unit 47. I've located the missing hiker. Ashley Brennan is safe and uninjured. Escorting her back to Trailhead Alpha now." The radio crackled back with Sarah's voice from dispatch. "Copy that, Christopher. Great work. ETA?" 45 minutes, I replied, watching Ashley adjust her backpack straps. She seemed perfectly normal, a little embarrassed, grateful for the help. Just another successful rescue to add to my record. We'd been hiking for maybe 20 minutes when I noticed the silence. No bird calls, no rustling in the underbrush. Even the ever-present sound of the Hoh River seemed muted. In my experience, animals going quiet usually meant predators nearby. mountain lions or bears. I instinctively moved closer to Ashley. "Stay close," I told her, my hand moving to the bear spray on my belt. "Something's got the wildlife spooked." She nodded, her brown eyes scanning the towering Sitka spruces that formed a cathedral ceiling above us. The October afternoon light filtered through the canopy in pale, slanted beams that seemed to bend at wrong angles. That's when my radio crackled to life with a burst of static so loud it made us both jump. "Christopher? Christopher, can you hear me?" The voice was faint, distorted, but unmistakably female. I grabbed the radio from my belt, frowning at the display. The signal strength showed full bars, but something was wrong with the audio quality. "This is Ranger Christopher, go ahead." "Christopher, I'm lost. I can't find the trail. Please help me." I glanced at Ashley, who was staring at my radio with a strange expression. "This is Ranger Christopher," I repeated into the device. "What's your location?" Static filled the airwaves for several seconds before the voice returned clearer now. "I'm near the big fallen log, the one that crosses the creek. Do you know where that is?" My blood went cold. There were dozens of fallen logs crossing various creeks throughout the park. The description was too vague, too generic. Standard protocol required specific landmarks or GPS coordinates. No experienced hiker would give such useless location data. "I need more specific information," I said into the radio. "Can you see any trail markers? Do you have GPS coordinates?" "Please. I'm so scared. It's getting dark and I hear things moving in the trees." Ashley grabbed my arm. "Christopher," she whispered urgently. "We need to go. Now." I looked at her, surprised by the fear in her voice. "It's just someone who needs help. It's my job." "That voice," she interrupted, her grip tightening on my jacket. "Don't you recognize it?" Before I could ask what she meant, the radio squawked again. "Christopher, why aren't you helping me? I thought you cared about people." The voice was becoming more distinct, more familiar. My stomach dropped as recognition dawned. It sounded like... No, it couldn't be. "Sarah?" I called into the radio. "Sarah, is that you? This isn't proper radio protocol." Laughter echoed from the speaker. Cold, hollow laughter that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Oh, Christopher, you still don't understand, do you?" Ashley was pulling at my sleeve now, trying to drag me down the trail. "We have to leave," she hissed. "Right now." The radio crackled again, and this time the voice was crystal clear. "Christopher, it's me. It's Ashley. I'm lost and I need you to come find me." I stared at the device in my hand, then looked at Ashley standing beside me. She had gone pale, her eyes wide with terror. "That's impossible," I whispered. The Ashley next to me shook her head frantically. "It's not me, I'm right here. Christopher, that thing is using my voice." But the radio continued. "Why won't you come get me, Christopher? I'm all alone and scared. Please don't leave me here." My training kicked in. Hoax calls were rare but not unheard of. Kids with CB radios sometimes tried to prank rangers, but the voice was perfect, identical to the young woman standing beside me down to the slight tremor when she was nervous. "Someone's playing games," I said, more to reassure myself than Ashley. "Probably just... Christopher?" The radio voice had changed again. Now it sounded like my wife, Jennifer. "Christopher, where are you? Emma's sick and she's asking for Daddy. You need to come home." My hands were shaking as I keyed the mic. "Jennifer? How did you get on the Ranger frequency?" "Please come home, honey. Emma has a fever and she won't stop crying for you." Emma, my 8-year-old daughter. The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every subtle accent that Jennifer had picked up growing up in Portland. But my wife didn't even know how to use a radio, let alone access Ranger frequencies. Ashley was backing away from me now, her face a mask of pure terror. "Christopher, look at me. Look at my lips, I'm not talking." But the voice that sounded exactly like Ashley continued to pour from the radio. "I found something, Christopher. Something terrible. There are bones here. So many bones. I think this is where they bring people." "Who?" I demanded, fighting the growing panic in my chest. "Who brings people where?" "The ones who live in the static," the Ashley voice replied. "They've been waiting for you, Christopher. They know your name. They know your family." The radio went silent for a moment, then Jennifer's voice returned. "Christopher, I'm scared. There's someone at the door and they're trying to get in. They say they know where you are." I was hyperventilating now, my 17 years of experience crumbling in the face of something impossible. I fumbled for my cell phone, trying to call Jennifer, but there was no signal. There was never cell signal this deep in the forest. "This isn't real," I said aloud, as much to convince myself as Ashley. "Someone's hacking the radio frequency. It's some kind of technology I don't understand." But Ashley wasn't listening. She was staring at something behind me, her mouth open in a silent scream. I turned and saw what had captured her attention. About 50 yards up the trail, a figure was walking toward us. It was a woman in a red North Face jacket, carrying a blue JanSport backpack. She looked exactly like Ashley. I looked back at the Ashley beside me, then at the approaching figure, both identical down to the smallest detail. "Christopher," came the voice from my radio, perfectly synchronized with the approaching woman's lips. "I've been looking for you. Why did you leave me?" The Ashley next to me grabbed my hand. Her palm was ice cold and trembling. "That's not me," she whispered. "Christopher, that thing isn't me." The approaching figure stopped about 20 feet away. When she spoke, her voice came from both her mouth and my radio simultaneously. "You let me disappear, Christopher. You were supposed to protect me." "I found you," I said weakly. "You're right here. I found you." Both Ashleys spoke in unison now, their voices creating an eerie harmony. "Which one of us is real, Christopher? How can you tell? How can you ever be sure?" If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Christopher's situation? Comment below. My radio erupted with voices, dozens of them, all people I knew. Jennifer, Emma, my partner Rick, dispatcher Sarah, my father who'd been dead for 3 years. All talking at once, all calling my name, all begging for help. "Christopher, save us. Christopher, we're lost. Christopher, why won't you answer? Christopher, they're coming for your family next." I ripped the radio from my belt and hurled it against a tree. The plastic casing shattered, but the voices continued, now seeming to come from the air around me. "It's in my head," I gasped, pressing my palms against my ears. "It's inside my head." Both Ashleys were advancing on me now, moving with identical steps, identical expressions of false concern. As they drew closer, I could see that neither cast a shadow on the forest floor. "You can't run from the frequency, Christopher," they said in stereo. "It follows you everywhere. Every radio, every phone, every electronic device. We're in all of them now." I stumbled backward, my boot catching on a root. As I fell, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The Ashley I'd been talking to, the one I'd thought was real, was starting to flicker like a bad television signal. Her edges were becoming indistinct, static-filled. "Oh, God," I whispered. "You're not real either." The flickering Ashley smiled, and her teeth were made of writhing static. "Very good, Christopher, you're learning. The real Ashley disappeared yesterday, just like all the others. We've been wearing her voice, her face, leading you deeper into our territory." I scrambled to my feet and ran. Behind me, laughter echoed through the forest, not just from the Ashley figures, but from every tree, every shadow, every surface that could potentially hide a speaker. The entire forest had become a massive radio, broadcasting my terror back at me. I ran blindly through the undergrowth, branches tearing at my uniform, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My radio training told me to head downhill toward the river, but every direction looked the same. The trees seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, creating new paths that led deeper into the wilderness. After what felt like hours, I collapsed against a massive Douglas fir, my chest burning. In the silence, I could hear it again, the faint sound of radio static coming from somewhere nearby. I looked around frantically until I spotted it. An old, rusted radio sitting on a moss-covered log about 10 feet away. The kind from the 1950s, with a large antenna and analog dials. It definitely hadn't been there moments before. As I watched, the radio's dial began to move on its own, scanning through frequencies. Each station it passed produced a brief snippet of sound. "Christopher, where are you? Help me, I'm trapped. Your daughter is asking for her daddy. We have Ashley, come and get her." The dial settled on a frequency, and Jennifer's voice came through clear as day. "Christopher, thank God you're there. Listen to me carefully. Emma is missing. She walked out of the house an hour ago and I can't find her anywhere. The police are looking, but... Christopher, she was talking about you. She said she could hear Daddy calling for help on her walkie-talkie." My heart nearly stopped. Emma had a little pink walkie-talkie she'd gotten for her birthday. Jennifer and I had laughed about how she liked to pretend she was a ranger like Daddy. "Christopher, I found a note in her room, in her handwriting. It says, 'Gone to help Daddy in the forest.' Christopher, how could she know where you are?" I stumbled toward the radio, my hands shaking. Jennifer, if this is really you, you need to lock the doors. Don't let Emma out of your sight." But the frequency had changed again. Now it was Emma's small, frightened voice. "Daddy? Daddy, I can hear you, but I can't see you. Where are you? It's getting dark and I'm scared." Tears were streaming down my face. "Emma? Emma, where are you, baby?" "I'm in the forest, Daddy, just like you. A nice lady told me you needed help. She looked just like the missing girl from TV. She said you were hurt and calling for me." The pieces clicked together in my mind with horrible clarity. The entity didn't just mimic voices. It could project them through any radio frequency, anywhere. It had used my voice to lure Emma out of the house, just like it had used Ashley's voice to lead me deeper into the forest. "Emma, listen to Daddy very carefully," I said into the ancient radio, praying she could hear me. "That lady isn't real. You need to run home right now. Run as fast as you can." "But Daddy, she says you're hurt. She says you need me to come help you, just like you help other people." The voice changed again, becoming cold and alien. "She's ours now, Christopher. Just like Ashley, just like all the others who thought they were rescuing someone. Your daughter will make such beautiful sounds when we add her voice to our collection." Pure rage flooded through me, burning away the fear and confusion. This thing, whatever it was, had my daughter. The same protective instinct that had driven me to become a ranger, to spend my life saving others, now focused to a laser point. I grabbed the radio and smashed it against the tree. Sparks flew and the metal casing cracked, but Emma's voice continued to emanate from the broken device. "Daddy, why won't you come get me? I'm scared and alone." "Because you're not my daughter," I growled. "My daughter is safe at home with her mother." But even as I said it, doubt crept in. What if it really was Emma? What if the entity had somehow transported her here? What if I was condemning my own child by not following the voice? The broken radio laughed with Jennifer's voice. "How can you be sure, Christopher? How can you ever be sure of anything again? Every phone call could be us, every radio transmission, every voice you hear for the rest of your life. We're in the frequency now, Christopher. We're everywhere." I closed my eyes and tried to think like a ranger, not a terrified father. The entity fed on doubt, on the inability to distinguish truth from lies. It wanted me confused, panicked, making desperate decisions. But there was one thing it couldn't fake: silence. I turned off my handheld radio and removed the battery. I pulled out my cell phone and turned it off completely. I even took off my wristwatch, which had a small radio receiver for atomic time synchronization. In the sudden electronic silence, the forest returned to normal. Bird calls resumed in the distance. The sound of the Ho River became audible again. Without the constant chatter of false voices, I could think clearly for the first time in hours. I had been heading northwest away from the main trail. The river was to my south. If I followed it downstream, I would eventually reach the road. From there, I could get to a landline phone and call Jennifer to make sure Emma was safe. But as I started walking, I heard something that made me freeze. Actual human voices calling my name, not from a radio or hidden speaker, but real people shouting through the trees. "Christopher, Christopher, where are you?" It was Rick's voice, my partner, and Sarah from dispatch, and what sounded like a full search and rescue team. My first instinct was relief. Backup had arrived. But then I remembered, the entity could perfectly mimic any voice. How could I tell if these were real rescuers or more phantoms? I climbed up onto a large boulder to get a better view. Through the trees, I could see flashlight beams moving in a coordinated search pattern. If it was the entity, it was putting on an incredibly detailed performance. "Over here," I shouted. "Rick, Sarah, I'm over here." The flashlight beams immediately turned in my direction, and within minutes, I could see my colleagues hiking toward me through the undergrowth. Rick was in the lead, wearing his standard ranger uniform and carrying his emergency pack. Sarah was behind him with the radio equipment. 3 other rangers I recognized brought up the rear. "Jesus Christ, Christopher," Rick called out as he approached. "We've been looking for you for 6 hours. Dispatch lost contact and your GPS transponder went dead." 6 hours? It felt like I'd been in the forest for maybe 2 hours, but my watch was in my pocket, turned off so I had no way to verify the time. "The girl," I said as Rick reached me. "Ashley Brennan. Did you find her?" Rick's expression grew confused. "Christopher, what are you talking about?" "Ashley Brennan was found yesterday. She's been in the hospital since last night. Severe hypothermia and dehydration. Her family reported that she was talking about seeing a ranger in the forest, but she was delirious from exposure." My legs nearly gave out. "Yesterday? But I found her today. I was escorting her back when..." "When what?" Sarah asked, setting down her radio equipment. I looked at the radio rig and felt my stomach clench. "Don't turn that on," I said quickly. "Whatever you do, don't turn on any radios." Rick and Sarah exchanged glances. "Christopher," Rick said gently, "how do you think we found you? We've been coordinating the search by radio all day." "All day?" I was losing my grip on reality again. "What time is it?" Sarah checked her watch. "Nearly 9 p.m. The sun set an hour ago." I looked up and realized she was right. The forest was dark, illuminated only by their flashlights. How had I missed the transition from day to night? "Christopher," Rick said, his voice taking on the careful tone people use with mental patients. "You radioed in this morning that you'd found Ashley Brennan. But when dispatch tried to get an update, all they heard was static. We've been searching for you since noon." "This morning?" I stared at him in confusion. "No, that's wrong. I found her this afternoon. We were walking back and then the radio started." I trailed off as the implications hit me. If Ashley had been found yesterday, if I'd been missing all day, if everything I remembered was wrong. "The entity," I whispered. "It's been playing with my memory. It's been showing me things that aren't real." Rick stepped closer, his expression concerned. "Entity? Christopher, what entity?" Before I could answer, Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Rick? Sarah? This is base station. We've got a problem. We just received a distress call from Christopher's daughter. Emma Brennan says her father is calling for help from somewhere in the forest." My blood turned to ice. "Emma's last name isn't Brennan," I said slowly. "It's Morgan. Emma Morgan." Sarah keyed her radio. "Base station, please repeat. Did you say Emma Brennan?" "Negative. Emma Morgan. She's 8 years old and claims her father contacted her on her toy walkie-talkie asking for help. Her mother is frantic." The radio fell silent. Then Jennifer's terrified voice came through. "Please, you have to find him. Emma says Christopher is trapped somewhere and that bad people are trying to hurt him. She's been talking to him for hours on that damn toy, but every time I try to take it away, she screams that Daddy needs her help." Rick and Sarah were staring at me with growing alarm. "Christopher," Rick said carefully, "your daughter's name is Emma Morgan, right?" I nodded, unable to speak. And the missing hiker was Ashley Brennan? Another nod. So, why did you just say Emma's last name was Brennan? I hadn't realized I'd said that. The entity was still in my head, still mixing up reality and fiction, still making me question everything I knew to be true. Sarah's radio crackled again. We need all units to return to base immediately. We've got multiple reports of false distress calls coming from different parts of the forest. Hikers are calling in voices asking for help. But when we send teams to investigate, there's no one there. Also, the voice continued, we've had 3 rangers go missing in the last hour while investigating these calls. Last radio contact placed them all in Grid 7, which is approximately 2 miles from Christopher's last known position. Rick grabbed the radio from Sarah. Base station, this is Rick. We've found Christopher and he's safe. We're bringing him out now. Negative, Rick. Christopher is already here at base station. He returned 20 minutes ago reporting that the Ashley Brennan situation was resolved. The forest went completely silent. Even the insects stopped their chirping. Rick, Sarah, and the other rangers were staring at me with expressions of dawning horror. If Christopher is at base station, Sarah whispered, then who the hell are you? Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Ashley. I read every single one. I felt my face, my hands, my body. Everything felt real and solid. I'm Christopher, I said desperately. I'm the real Christopher. That thing at base station is the entity. It's impersonating me. But as the words left my mouth, I realized the terrible truth. I had no way to prove who I was. No way to distinguish myself from a perfect supernatural copy. For all I knew, I was the copy, implanted with false memories of a life that belonged to someone else. The entity had won. It had created a scenario where truth became impossible to determine, where every voice could be a lie, where even my own identity was in question. Rick was backing away from me now, his hand moving toward his emergency radio. Base station, he said slowly. We need immediate backup at Grid 7. We have a situation. Copy that, Rick. Christopher is standing right here if you want to talk to him. A voice came through the radio that was unmistakably mine. Rick, thank God you found someone. I've been worried sick. That person you're with, they're not who they claim to be. I've been trying to track down this thing all day. It's been impersonating missing hikers to lure rangers into the forest. No, I said, my voice breaking. That's not me. I'm me. I'm Christopher Morgan. My wife is Jennifer. My daughter is Emma. She's 8 years old and she loves to pretend she's a ranger. We live on Cedar Street in Port Angeles. My badge number is 2847. Rick spoke into the radio. Christopher, what's your badge number? 2847, came the immediate reply in my voice. Rick, be very careful. This entity can access memories, personal information, everything. It's been studying me all day. Sarah was slowly reaching for her sidearm. Christopher, she said to me, what was the last thing you said to your wife this morning before leaving for work? I searched my memory desperately. I told her I'd be home for dinner, that I wouldn't miss Emma's soccer practice. The radio crackled. That's exactly what it would say. Rick, Emma doesn't have soccer practice on Mondays. She has piano lessons. The real Christopher would never forget that. My heart sank. Piano lessons. Emma had piano lessons on Monday. How could I have forgotten something so basic about my own daughter's schedule? Unless I wasn't the real Christopher. Unless I was just a collection of stolen memories and false experiences, created by something that didn't quite understand the details of human life. I don't know what's real anymore, I whispered, sinking to my knees. Rick kept his radio keyed. Christopher, if you're really you, what did Emma give you for Father's Day last year? Silence stretched for several seconds before my voice came through the speaker. A coffee mug she made in art class. It said "World's Best Daddy" and had her handprint on it. I stared at the radio in horror. That was exactly right. But I remembered it too. We both had the same memories. Rick, the radio continued in my voice. Ask it about the scar on my left shoulder. The real Christopher would know how he got it. Sarah trained her flashlight on my left shoulder. Through my ranger shirt, the outline of an old scar was barely visible. I remembered getting it as a child, falling off my bike and catching my shoulder on a broken fence post. Bike accident when I was 9, I said. Caught my shoulder on a fence post trying to avoid hitting Mrs. Henderson's cat. The radio response was immediate. See? It knows everything about me. But here's something only the real Christopher would know. What did I find in Emma's backpack last week that I didn't tell Jennifer about? My mind went blank. I had no memory of finding anything in Emma's backpack, let alone keeping it secret from Jennifer. A pregnancy test, the radio voice continued. Jennifer doesn't know about it yet. I've been trying to figure out how to handle the situation. The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma was only 8 years old. Why would she have, unless someone had given it to her, or she'd found it somewhere, or... I realized I was thinking about it wrong. The entity was making things up, creating false scenarios to confuse the real rescue team. Or maybe I was the false one, and the real Christopher was desperately trying to prove his identity from base station. None of this is real, I said aloud. The pregnancy test, the perfect memories, the identical scars. You're creating all of it. You're making us doubt everything. Rick and Sarah were now flanking me, their weapons drawn but not yet pointed in my direction. They were trained professionals trying to handle an impossible situation. Rick, the radio said in my voice, it's right about one thing. Nothing can be trusted anymore. This entity has corrupted everything. Radio frequencies, memories, even physical evidence. There's only one way to end this. What? Rick asked. You have to destroy all radio equipment in the forest. Every radio, every cell phone, every electronic device. Cut off its ability to communicate. Then it'll be trapped in whatever form it's currently wearing. I felt a chill of recognition. The entity wasn't trying to prove its identity. It was trying to eliminate all electronic communication so it could operate without interference. Don't listen to it, I said urgently. It wants you to destroy the radios because that's how it spreads. Through radio frequencies. If you cut off communication, you'll be isolated and vulnerable. Exactly what it would say. The radio responded immediately. Rick, Sarah, think about it. Has anything made sense since you started using radios to coordinate this search? How many false calls have you received? How many voices have led you in circles? Sarah lowered her radio slightly. It has a point. We've been getting dozens of fake distress calls all day. Maybe if we shut down electronic communication. No, I said desperately. That's what it wants. It's trying to isolate you so it can pick you off one by one. Your only protection is staying in contact with base station. But even as I said it, I wondered if I was wrong. Maybe the electronic silence was the answer. Maybe the entity could only function through radio waves and electronic devices. The terrible truth was that there was no way to know. The entity had created a perfect paradox where any action could be right or wrong, where trust was impossible, where even my own thoughts might not be my own. Last test, the radio said in my voice. Rick, remember what we talked about last Christmas at the station party? About why I really became a ranger? Rick nodded slowly. Yeah, I remember. Then you know what I'm going to ask you to do. Rick's face went pale in the flashlight beam. He raised his sidearm and pointed it directly at my chest. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. But the real Christopher told me that if we ever encountered something like this, something that could perfectly mimic people, there was only one way to be sure. What are you talking about? I asked, backing away from the gun. He made me promise, Rick continued, tears streaming down his face. If I ever had to choose between two Christophers, I should shoot the one standing in front of me, because the real Christopher would never put me in that position. He'd rather die than make me choose. The radio crackled with my voice. Do it, Rick. End this thing before it hurts anyone else. I stared at my friend, my partner of 8 years, as he prepared to kill me based on the word of a voice coming through a radio speaker. The entity had orchestrated this perfectly. Whether I was real or fake, someone was going to die, and the survivor would never be certain they'd made the right choice. "Rick," I said quietly, "if you pull that trigger, you'll never know if you killed your friend or saved him. Is that something you can live with?" His hand was shaking now, the gun wavering between my chest and the ground. "Do it," the radio urged. "Every second you hesitate gives it more time to corrupt your mind, to make you doubt what you know is right." Sarah stepped forward. "There has to be another way. Some test that only the real Christopher would pass." But I realized there wasn't. The entity was perfect. It had all my memories, all my mannerisms, all my knowledge. The only difference was location. One Christopher was here in the forest, one was at base station. But even that proved nothing, since the entity could theoretically be in multiple places at once. Unless... "Emma," I said suddenly. "Call Emma directly. Not through base station, not through dispatch. Call her at home on the landline. If there's one thing the entity can't fake, it's a real conversation with someone who loves me." Rick considered this, then shook his head. "But how would we know the voice we're hearing is really Emma? The entity could be simulating her too." He was right. The entity had created a closed loop of doubt where nothing could be verified, where every piece of evidence could be false, where reality itself had become unreliable. The radio spoke again in my voice. "Rick, I need you to listen very carefully. The entity is about to try something new. It's going to offer you a solution that seems logical but is actually designed to help it escape. Don't trust anything it says next." I opened my mouth to speak, then closed it. Anything I said now would be dismissed as the entity's attempt to escape. The thing had managed to discredit me before I even spoke. That's when I realized the truth. It didn't matter who was real and who was fake. The entity had already won. It had destroyed trust, corrupted communication, and turned friends into enemies. Even if Rick chose correctly, even if he killed the right target, the damage was done. None of us would ever trust a radio call again. None of us would ever be certain of another person's identity. The entity hadn't just invaded our radios. It had invaded our minds, planting seeds of doubt that would grow and spread long after this night was over. I looked at Rick, still holding the gun on me, tears streaming down his face as he struggled with an impossible choice. I looked at Sarah, frantically checking and rechecking her radio equipment as if she could somehow find a frequency that hadn't been corrupted. I looked at the other rangers, standing frozen in indecision, and I realized that this was how the entity fed, not on flesh or blood, but on confusion and doubt, on the breakdown of human trust and communication. It had turned us all into walking broadcast stations of fear and uncertainty. 10 seconds, Rick," the radio said in my voice. "If you don't take the shot, I'm ordering all units to retreat and calling in federal backup. This thing cannot be allowed to leave the forest." Rick's finger moved to the trigger, and in that moment, standing in the darkness of the Olympic forest with a gun pointed at my heart, I finally understood what I had to do. I smiled at my friend and said the one thing the entity would never think to say, the one phrase that proved beyond any doubt who was real and who was fake. "Rick, don't shoot. I forgive you either way." The gun lowered slowly as understanding dawned in Rick's eyes. The real Christopher would never order anyone to kill. The real Christopher would understand the impossible position his friend was in. The real Christopher would forgive. The radio went silent for the first time in hours, and in that silence, I heard something beautiful. Emma's real voice calling my name from somewhere in the forest, not from a speaker or radio, but echoing through the trees as she and Jennifer searched for me with flashlights and love. "Daddy! Daddy! Where are you?" I ran toward my daughter's voice, leaving the static and lies behind, my family's love guiding me home through the darkness. The phantom frequency could mimic any voice, steal any memory, corrupt any signal. But it could never replicate the one thing that truly mattered: the pure, uncorrupted love between a father and his child. That frequency was mine alone. End of transmission.